Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. And also, the Pigs Playing Magic Kickstarter has launched, so make sure you check that out. The Kickstarter campaign is going to last for 30 days, and after that, the playmat will no longer be available for purchase. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, in Commander, Mono White has been considered to be the weakest color identity for a long time, and for good reason. Now, Wizards is making improvements here and there on some things, but Wizards is an extremely busy company that doesn't really have time to, tackle every single thing that the players might need or ask for. So, Wizards, don't worry about it. I've got it. I'm handling this. I have fixed Mono White. Now, there are two reasons that Mono White is weak in Commander, and one of them is card draw. But this year, we finally got some legitimate card draw in Mono White with Mangar the Diplomat. He has, whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if two or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, draw a card. And whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. So it might be conditional card draw, but still in a game of Commander, these things are going to happen and you're going to be drawing cards from Mangara. Previously, Wizards' stance on card draw in Mono White is that it's something that Mono White doesn't do. But with the printing of this card, Mark Rosewater, the head designer at Wizards, had this to say. I've come to realize that I need to reframe how I thought of White. Card draw is too fundamental to the game to cut out a color. We're still going to keep it fifth in card drawing, but we're working to figure out how to make card draw organically white in a way that doesn't undercut its philosophy or flavor. So it appears that Wizards is finally taking steps to fix the card draw problem in White. But card draw is only one of two reasons as to why Mono White is the weakest color in Commander. And the other half of that is the other most important thing in Commander, ramp. Mono White is terrible at ramping and is definitely worse than all the other colors. Now, when I do bring this up, I do get comments on how green, yes, is the best color for ramping, but all the other colors are weak at ramping. And I would strongly disagree with that. Green is by far the best, but the other three colors definitely have effective ways at gaining mana advantage. For example, Mono Black has ritual effects like Dark Ritual. It also has cards like Cabal Coffers that benefit you based on the number of swamps that you have. And it even has cards like Crypt Gas that can double up the effectiveness of your swamps. And Red also has access to rituals with an incredibly powerful one like Mana Geyser. It can also make an incredible amount of treasures with something like a Dockside Extortionist. And it's got plenty of ways to cheat on mana with something like a Tali Primal Storm. Even Blue has an incredibly powerful ritual spell like High Tide. And it can also untap your lands with something like Turnabout. And it even has some really old mana dorks like Apprentice Wizard, which is basically a Palladia. So with all things considered, I would say that Mono White is by far weaker than all the other colors when it comes to ramp. And that is a huge disadvantage, so I'm fixing it. I used MTG.design to make some custom cards, so Wizards again, you're welcome. I've done the work for you. Now, please keep in mind that I'm definitely not a Magic judge, so I probably have some wording on there wrong, but you'll get the gist. But with all that said, let's jump into these cards. First up, there's Wayfarer of the Bauble. You see what I did there? Clever, right? Anyways, Wayfarer of the Bauble is a 1/1 human that costs 2 and a white. When Wayfarer of the Bauble enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic plains and put it into your hand. If an opponent controls more lands than you, put it onto the battlefield tapped instead, then shuffle your library. So this card is going to get you a basic plains no matter what, but it can go in one of two places. If you're behind on lands, it goes into play, and if you're not, it goes into your hand. Situational ramp, I think, is a fair way to fix Mono White. Again, conditional and situational card draw is something that they are exploring when it comes to White as well. Chances are someone's going to be ahead of you on lands, and if they are, this ramps you. There is a big difference between this and something like Core Cartographer in my opinion. 3 mana for a creature that potentially ramps you is much more valuable than one that costs 4. That 1 mana difference is huge. And yes, Mono White does have ways to blink creatures, so you can get some extra value out of this. Now, taking this same card design and applying to a sorcery, we get land equivalents. It's a sorcerer for 1 and a white, and it says, search your library for a basic plains and put it into your hand. If an opponent controls more lands than you, put it onto the battlefield instead, then shuffle your library. Essentially the exact same concept, but as a sorcery for 2 mana. If you're already ahead of other players when it comes to lands, this isn't going to get you any further ahead, though it will get you that card in your hand. But if you're behind, this is going to help you catch up. Essentially, this is a conditional ramping growth, but again, just for a basic plains. I think that basic plains part is important for these cards for a couple of reasons. The basic reason is that this card is intended to specifically benefit mono white decks. So by making it just get a basic plains, that limits its use for other decks. But in mono white, that's what you're going to be getting anyways. Next up though, let's perhaps go on to the splashiest card out of all these with Adjusted Balance. It's a sorcery that costs 3 and a white, and it says choose an opponent with the greatest number of lands in play. Each other player counts the number of lands they control, then searches their library for a number of basic lands equal to the difference and puts those lands onto the battlefield tapped. Then each player who searched their library this way shuffles their library. Now, mono white already has ways to make the entire field equal when it comes to lands, but those ways tend to be, let's just blow up all the lands. In Commander, many players don't like when you blow up their lands, so some players consider those cards to break the social contract. This card also balances out the number of lands in play, but in a different way that might be less salty. If the green player is ramping a ton and gets way ahead of everyone else, this just says, hey, everyone else gets that same amount. This is probably the hardest card when it came to designing and balancing, so I'm sure some things can be adjusted to make it better, but this is what I've got for now. And keep in mind that this doesn't just benefit you, it benefits every player that's not the player in the lead. I think that's an important part when it comes to the design of this card. Mono white's not really supposed to get ahead on lands, but this can help you catch up. But now let's go into another concept for mono white ramp cards, in which I took some inspiration from the Spectral Chaos set. So my first iteration on this concept comes with Overgrown Field. It's an aura that costs 1 and a white, and it says Enchant Plains, Enchanted Land has hexproof, and whenever Enchanted Land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional colorless. White is the premier enchantment color, and it's time that mono white gets ramped with enchantments. Now let's break this card down into its 3 parts. Again, being specific and saying Enchant Plains is just going to restrict what kind of decks are going to want to use it. Giving the land some sort of protection, like hexproof, I think is really important. Although land destruction in Commander isn't typical, it does happen. But it's usually one-offs and more targeted spells like a Decimate or a Beast Within. And making this ramp at least somewhat safe, I think is important. And with that final piece, I don't know if it really matters if it's white or if it's colorless, because if you're in mono white, you really don't need that kind of fixing. Now let's move on to the next iteration of this card with Field of Plenty. It's an aura for 1 white, and it says Enchant Plains, Enchanted Land has hexproof, and whatever Enchanted Land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional colorless. So essentially the exact same thing, but it costs 1 more, and it gives you 1 more mana. It's kind of like an Overgrowth, but for white, and it gives you colorless mana. Now, 3 mana to ramp by 2, is that too much? I'm not sure. You'll have to let me know in the comments below. Again, I'm not a professional card designer. Let's take a look at another concept, though, in the same vein with Cash Crop. It's an aura that costs 1 and a white and says Enchant Plains, Enchanted Land has Shroud, and Enchanted Land has tap, add colorless. Now, Shroud is slightly different than Hexproof because you can't target that land now as well. Not sure if that really matters too much, but I'm just trying it out. And this time it has a land tap for colorless, so it essentially takes out any mana fixing. In my opinion, the more options that mono white has when it comes to ramp, the better. So let's move on to our last aura with Fortifications. It's an aura that costs white, and it says Enchant Plains, Enchanted Land is indestructible, and whenever Enchanted Land is tapped for mana, its controller adds additional white. So this one does make the land indestructible, making it pretty hard to deal with, and it also gives white. But to compensate for that, it does cost white, so this can really only be guaranteed to come out on turn 2 in mono white decks. Again, in my opinion, the more specific that you can make these and tailor them for mono white and not really for other colors, the better. But now let's move on to my final concept, which might be a little out there, but bear with me. And with this one, I am sure I worded things incorrectly, and so I apologize for that. Anyways, Great Plains is an artifact that costs white, and it comes into play with 3 crop counters on it. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, remove a crop counter from Great Plains. When Great Plains has no crop counters on it, it's a plains, it's no longer an artifact. So essentially this doesn't start off as a land, but it sits there until your opponents play enough lands, and then it becomes a land. So there is some risk because there is a chance it might get destroyed before it becomes a land. So it is somewhat like land ramp, but it is dependent on your opponents. And again, situational or conditional things I think are important to consider when it comes to mono white ramp, at least when it comes to mono white land ramp. Now, are all these designs perfect? Absolutely not. But I think starting a discussion like this and bringing up concepts for what could happen to help out mono white is important. You shouldn't be starting off a game with an incredible disadvantage just because you pick a mono white commander. So Wizards, along with mono white card draw, it's time for you to figure out mono white ramp. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on these cards are. Do they fix some of the problems in mono white, or could they do more? So yeah, let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks again, and have a good one.